Well, obviously preseason's over, and now we get to start the real. I know there's no such thing as preseason in college football, but in some ways the it's starting a Big Ten play is a big deal, obviously, and it's not like you didn't think that the other first 3 weeks of the season were huge, because it's what you have to do, But when it comes down to it, all your objectives, all your goals in the big picture is about when you get to the league being ready to play, and so this is exciting. Obviously, last week is. It's all about winning, and we found a way to win. We've talked about it several times that we got to find some ways to get out the gate a little bit faster and play with a little more confidence early, not have to put ourselves in the situation where you gotta get punched a few times before that passion and energy kind of shows in the way that which you play, not within the atmosphere of things. So all in all, someone said to me, I said it too, Rome wasn't built in 3 weeks, but we're hoping that Madison was built a little bit different right now in the first 3 weeks. But I think we've seen a lot of adverse things. We've seen a lot of situations that we've been challenged, obviously, on the road, obviously been challenged with not winning a ball game. We've been challenged with, struggling in first halves and going down on the score. And I think it's this opportunity, this time for us to continue to grow to what we've done and, start to put some of these things together and see a little bit more consistency across the board on what we're doing. And that's kind of what we're planning for, that's what we're preparing for, and that's what the expectation needs to continue to be.
Luke, it looked like Hunter Wohler was going to have a really good season based on practices, but what have you learned about him through this first month or so, and what he can potentially do for this team?
Yeah, very versatile. I think that's probably the first thing that stood out. I didn't get an opportunity in bowl practice to really see him. It was unique because he, pulled a hamstring. Obviously, got hurt early in the year last year, but then bowl season, he was out for most of practice, then played in the game, and I was surprised as to how well he played, and even that he was able to play from not practicing. And so that was probably my first indication that there's some natural, things that he does really well. And then obviously went through spring ball and through fall camp, and sometimes you're moving guys around and trying to figure out what's the best position for them. But no matter what, I think there's some really natural things to what it is that he does. When you talk about a guy with confidence, I think that's where you see him in particular. The second interception is a phenomenal play, but it's just great confidence of doing his job, but still being able to react to whatever happens within the situation of the game. And the ball's the issue. And so he's done a really good job, obviously, several tackles. I think he's got an average in 10 a game and things like that. So we got to be smart that we don't try to use him in too many different ways and still give him the opportunities to be close to the ball to use some of those instinctual things that he has.
Luke, I know you want faster starts. I know you want complete games. I'm curious, though, the third quarter that we've seen in all 3 games, do you believe that's a glimpse of what you could be?
I really do. I mean, I think that, when things start to go, I think we put ourselves in some really good situations. I think what it comes down to a lot of times is, some of those third down situations. I know defensively that's a big deal to us. I think offensively that's where, a focus needs to be, is being better on some of those situations. And when we make some of those third downs, it's amazing what kind of energy and momentum you get on both sides of the ball. So, yes, I think that's what it is that we are looking for. How do you get it? How do you get it earlier is got to be what we've got to find.
Luke, in preseason, Bicknell said that if he could bring in a guy or two off the bench to keep the O-line fresh, that was his goal. It looks like Trey Rettig, at least by snap count and how you're using him, is becoming a little bit more of a figure in there. What has he given you, whether it's versatility, whether it's consistency, to use him as much?
I think both. I think the ability for those guys to play at the level at which we want them to play. Another tough thing for Trey is sometimes, he might be the first guy to go in at tackle as well. So he's a guy we knew that we see as a starter, and he's earned that right. Just at what spot is it and where's it going to be and how's it going to be. But it gives us some versatility. We'd like to get Jake Renfro back and maybe give us some more versatility there with Bort. And then as those other young tackles develop as well, you like to really think you got 7 or 8. We have only played 6 for the most part. I mean, obviously some guys got in later in the game Saturday, but I think that we feel really, really good about those 6, and if we get in a situation where we've got to use 7 and 8, we will. But I just think that there's some growth that still needs to be done there, that those guys, aren't going to be in the rotation just as of yet.
Luke, you got a short week, obviously, going on the road on a Friday night. How does your preparation differ this week?
Well, it was late night last night, early morning. It'll be a late night tonight. You're trying to make up for that 24 hours. But you got to be smart, I mean, there's an energy that you have to have when you go out to practice. I don't know that, to be honest with you, I don't know that the players see as much of a difference. Obviously, they got to go out and practice today, which is normally their off day. But I don't know that it's as big a deal to them. I think the preparation for us is what's so unique. You get into that rhythm of what it is that you do on a Sunday and a Monday and a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and now you got to fast forward 24 hours. You don't want to not still do it the same way that which you've done it, but you got to do it with some more efficiency. You got to do it at some later hours that sometimes we don't all make the best decisions as it gets to 11, 12 o'clock in the night. So I think there's a balance to it. And once you get past Wednesday or Tuesday, later on Tuesday, I think it's pretty much back into your routine. But those first few, it's a little bit more of a challenge.
Luke, Greg Scruggs said last week that he thought the defensive line was kind of leaving meat on the bone. Where do you think the next step is for that group to start making some of those disruptive plays you guys talk about?
Well, I think that what doesn't get talked about nearly as much is I think we had 5 interceptions. I'm almost positive. I know 4 of them for sure that they were caused all by pressure, whether they were 3-man pressure, whether they're 4-man pressure, whether there's one guy getting by. Obviously, the tip ball is one that everybody, kind of sees truly. But I think the first one on Hunter Wohler, the nose guard, Barton, yes. Ben was hitting the quarterback, and he actually underthrew the ball, and it went to Hunter Wohler. And there's obviously the tip ball, and there was another one where he was hit and with pressure. So I think sometimes as a defensive line coach, you look for that little extra when sometimes in my mind sometimes the most overrated stat in football is sacks. And the most underrated stat in football is disruptions, and the ability, whether it's matching a hand, whether it's, just getting to that point where, you put him in a situation where he's got to throw a bad ball. And sometimes we get all tied into sacks, and instead of just going ahead and matching that hand, we're keeping on that edge and keep rolling. Next thing you know, he steps up and he's rolling and he's running. So I think there's a balance. I know I use that word a lot of times, as we didn't get turnovers, so then you start emphasizing turnovers. We haven't got as many sacks, and they start emphasizing that. Like, look, the idea is pressure. The idea is making guys stay in the pocket. The idea is making guys throw in the rhythm, which they don't want to. The sacks and those kinds of things will continue to come. But I still think that that's a little bit of where we're feeling who we are and trying to figure out where we're best fit in some of our 3- and 4-man fronts.
Say, Luke, with Ben Barton in particular, just how have you seen his development grow, especially from the spring to now, where he is being a contributor, he's making some impact plays like you saw on Saturday?
He's done a great job, and we call him the professor. So that's why at first I was starting to, I didn't want to say his nickname, but be honest with you, as we started spring ball and even into the start of fall camp, I didn't truly think that he was going to be in the rotation. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I just, I wasn't sure exactly where we were with Isaac Townsend and some other guys and Darian Varner. And it was interesting to see how this is going to work. And, Isaiah Mullins just happens to, be in the situation that he's in. And he's done nothing but continue to impress me every single day. And then it's done the same thing as, week 1, week 2, and week 3 of games. And every opportunity that he gets to go in the game, he's earned. And it wasn't just because, hey, we're thin or we don't have as many guys. He has done a really great job from where he was, I thought, in spring football, even where he was at the start of fall camp to where he is now. I think it's night and day.
Luke, C.J. Williams really flashed this spring, but that was before Bryson came back. Now that they're sharing reps, what's your sense of how C.J.'s handling that and responding to the challenge in that?
The great thing about C.J. is he's very mature. So some guys obviously would not handle it as well. Some guys haven't handled it as well. CJ's done a great job of it. I mean, I'm not sure. I know it probably is a little bit different deep down inside. As everybody wants the opportunities to play more, to get more balls, to have more, targets and things like that. But you wouldn't know the difference. At least I wouldn't. And don't think I don't watch, because that's what I do. I'm always trying to watch those kinds of things. It's not always what people say, but it's how they do things. It's body language and, going through the locker room, watching and seeing those kinds of things. So he's handling it great. I think he's doing a great job. I think he's continuing to grow. I mean, he's a second-year player, right? And there's a lot of growth that will continue to happen, especially because of the attitude that he has. So he's got a lot of football ahead of him. There's a lot of football this year ahead of him. I think he's doing a really good job. There'll be a lot more opportunities for him.
Luke, you mentioned briefly both Renfro and Mullins. Do you have an expectation of where they are this week? And if not, do you think the off week will give them a chance to come back?
I would hope maybe this week. If not this week, I would definitely expect that after the bye that, unless something else happens, that would be a definite time they should be back in there.
Luke, over the past couple of years, Purdue's always seemed to have a dynamic receiver too. This year, Dion Burks appears to be that guy. I'm curious what your early impressions are of him and that offense as a whole.
He's fast. He's definitely fast. He's definitely a guy that they move around and put into positions where they want to take some shots with him. He's a guy that's on the punt block unit. When you see those kinds of things, you know that it's a guy that they're trying to find more opportunities for to display the talents that he has, whether that's catching the football, whether that's making some impact plays on special teams. I think first thing that jumps out is speed. I think his ability to run, but also to track the football and make some of those big plays. Again, I couldn't tell you the history of what they've had uniquely. I know maybe the more or whatever they've had in the past 4 or 5, 6 years, but it seems to be each and every week we come up that somebody has one of those guys that is a bit of a difference maker. And what I would say that they've done a good job this year of doing in every game we've played is guys move those guys around and find ways to get them targets, and they've touched the ball a lot against us, so I would expect probably very similar things.
Look, it seems like the first 3 opponents you faced have tried to insert those safeties late close to the snap to change the numbers up in the run game. Do you think you're starting to find some counters to that? Because it seemed like some of those tight ends out in the flat, things like that.
Well, the number one counter to that is when they're running down from 10 yards is to run right at them, right? And over time, those things take a toll. That's one of those things when you're in certain safeties and decide A gaps and B gaps on a consistent basis. There's some things that take a toll on those. But I think we got a good idea of what it is. Sometimes the unique thing about that is that's the guy that's unblocked. But a lot of the situations, if that's the guy that's unblocked, as long as it's only one of them and there's a space there, there's times when we're going to go and take our chances. I think play 1 of the game was kind of what we were looking at, but in some ways we missed the Mike coming over the top that actually put 2 guys at the point of attack as opposed to just the one. And with their one with our backs, I mean that's kind of what we're looking for in some of those situations. But I think there's a lot more. We talk about meat left on the bone for the defensive line. There's a lot of meat left on the bone for us to continue to grow in what we're doing there and take advantage of some of the opportunities these guys that load up, especially in particular inside the box.
Luke, other than trying to start faster, obviously, against Purdue, what do you think are the biggest keys or things you want to see this week as you get into Big Ten play, and perhaps what your messaging may be to the team as you step into this next phase of the season?
Yeah, I think that we're still developing the confidence in what it is that we're doing. I think that we'll see, with a shorter week, it throws some more things on top of us, I think, as coaches, to be consistent in what we're doing, to understand, that there's a change in, in how we have to do things this week. But I think that has a lot to do with maturity and focus of our players too, right? I mean, yes, it's the start of Big Ten. Yes, this is kind of where the line was drawn on your schedule. I'm not saying you circled things, but you always draw a line there when conference play begins. And we wanted to be at a point where we knew exactly who we were and where we were headed. And I'm not saying we don't, because we believe in what it is we're doing, but I still think that there's been a lot of meat left on the bone there. And so every opportunity that we get to go out and practice is very critical. And not that practice isn't incredibly important, but as you get into what it is you're doing in year 3, 4, I just thinking back to the last few years, since even as we changed quarterbacks in the last year, I mean, the routine was kind of set, and sometimes by Thursday and Friday you could take it a little bit slower in the tempos of what you're doing and recover a little bit more. And right now I don't think we're there. Right now I think that every opportunity we get in our Thursday practices and our Friday practices are things that we have to do with more of pace and more tempo. And we always have to have a great focus, but I think in order to get more comfortable in the what's and the whys, we have to take advantage of every one of those practices, the Saturday morning walkthroughs that we have, especially on a night game, or Friday morning walkthrough that we'll have on a night game. Right now, we need to take advantage of every opportunity we have to be together, to communicate, and to do those things.
Regarding the punt, or the field goal block that New England used last night, coaches, if they see something works, they're gonna steal it. They're gonna use it. I know it's a short week, but at a minimum, do you go into the Purdue game thinking we need to be prepared just in case the Purdue staff sees that and tries to use it against us?
I got to see it, because it's just like any blitz, anything coming off an edge, timing is everything. What happens if he didn't go on the same tap? That's why I'm curious. Somebody's one of our recruits' dads sent it to me late last night and asked me, have you ever seen this? And I don't get to watch Sunday. All I do on Sunday night is, lay in bed late and check scores and try to peek at the the guys that you've had played and to see, statistically what did they do? Did they have any tackles? I don't really see any highlights. So that was the only one I've seen. So I'm a little busy right now, but asked about seeing what it is that they did. Did they do it on the punt as well? Or was it just a field goal or extra point? Yeah.
It looked like it was a gunner on a punt, and he just timed the sequence of the kicker.
Well, timing is everything.
Luke, how would you evaluate how Hayden Rettig played? He obviously had that long catch and run, but then was doing a lot of different things, blocking and other roles. It seemed like he had a pretty
he is
day.
doing a really good job. I mean, those guys are, obviously a little bit of a different role than what they have been in the past few years. And, he's probably a bit more exhausted. Maybe he's not as beat up at the end of a game of, playing inside the box for 42, 52, 60 snaps a game. But he's definitely wore out a little bit more. And I think what he has done transitioning-wise is just understanding how to play in space so much more. The intricacies of what is expected in the passing game, whether it's blocking on the perimeter, which is completely different than blocking inside the box. I think that position in particular and what we do is really unique. The versatility you need to have to be able to block at a point of attack, meaning to a defensive end, but then be able to move outside and block a corner or a nickel in space, and then to do all the other things as far as, route combinations and stuff is quite a bit of a growth. And he's doing a great job. I mean, he's a great example for the young kid that's behind him as well. And, I expect nothing but those guys to continue to grow. Obviously, he had a huge play right there at the, start of the fourth quarter, I think it was, or the end of the third right there, where I think it was 2nd and long after the penalty, and turned it into probably the play that kind of put a little bit of a knife in things from Saturday.
Luke, you talked about preparation early in the week, but how do you keep things the same on Friday and make it feel like a Saturday for your players? How do you make sure that they stay in that same kind of mindset when you talk about losing practices and that kind of thing?
Well, the only difference, a Friday for me is better when you're playing a Friday night, because there's not all these games to watch all during the day, and whatever's on TV and all the people that want to talk about the games and make their predictions and things. Fridays are great because there's none of that, right? And so it's not like our guys, I feel like they're distracted from watching it. And but we do more. We do more on a night game. We'll spend a good hour with some walkthroughs and guys together, and not just kind of letting them sit and lay around in a hotel room. I think everybody loves to play on a Friday night. It's obviously a little bit different in college football, but the atmosphere of a Friday night game, I've been fortunate, I think, in the last 4 years, maybe to play in about 6 of them. And for the most part, I think every single one of them has been quite a unique situation and a great atmosphere.
Luke, as you continue to learn about your team each game, is one of the things you feel like you're continuing to learn how best to utilize Ches and Braylon together, or Braylon as a pass catcher with checkdowns and swing routes. Are you still trying to find the right ways for both of those guys?
I think we always are. I think defensively, still trying to always find the best. How do you use a Hunter Wohler? How do you use your two inside linebackers that is a little bit different in what they're most comfortable doing as well. But I don't think it'd be any different if it was year 2, 3, or 4. Right? You start a season, you've got an idea of what it is that but you ultimately have to continue to evolve. I think good teams, can grow, but I think great teams have concepts and systems and continue to, grow within those. They don't wholesale change. They don't go from, 10, 11 personnel to all of a sudden 22 personnel back. But they understand that there's an evolution in what it is that they're doing every year, just like you have with leadership. You could think you've got the very similar team coming back because you got leaders, and the uniqueness is there's dynamics that are always different. Year one's unique, but I think it's important for us to stick with the things that we truly believe, but evolve with the things that we know our kids can do better.